You're listening to the Membership Site Success Podcast, where you learn from successful entrepreneurs how to build and run a profitable membership site so that you too can generate recurring revenue for your business month after month. And now, here's your host, membership site expert, Vic Dorfman.
Today on the Membership Site Success Podcast, I am tickled to have my friend Ashley Myers come on and talk with us. And Ashley is the owner of therightcast.com and sellingyourscreenplay.com, which is going to be the main topic of our interview today. And Selling Your Screenplay is very interesting from a recurring revenue perspective because what Ashley has done is he's taken one of his passions, which is screenwriting, and he's built a community for screenwriters and a resource for screenwriters, and he's monetized his site based around services for aspiring screenwriters who want to sell and option their scripts. So for listeners who have a passion project, whether it's music and art, writing, something along those lines, this is one of those episodes that you're really going to love because, and I myself as a musician as well, is one of the reasons why I really, really wanted to have Ashley on, is because it's always great to get a lot of examples of people who have taken their passion, who have found a way to help that community and to make a nice living in the process. So this is a really fun episode. Ashley's a super smart guy, an amazing businessman with a lot of hustle in his blood. So you're going to really enjoy this episode. Make sure to leave your comments, rate this episode on iTunes, and enjoy. Yeah, so the first question is, and actually I don't think I've ever asked you about this, even though we've been doing the Productized Service Mastermind for so long, but how did you get into entrepreneurship? How did you get into business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the long answer or the short answer. I mean, in the late 90s, the internet boom was really on, and I was just looking for a job, and I had moved to Los Angeles. I was trying to sell screenplays. I actually sold a screenplay, options a screenplay, but things didn't really click after that. So this was by like 1999, 2000. The internet boom was on, and I had set up a website for my screenwriting. So it was just literally ashleymyers.com, and I listed a bunch of log lines. And my dad had done a little bit of web development at his job, so he just basically kind of helped me, and he said, hey, in a day you can learn HTML. It's really not that complicated. And this was back, as I said, in 1999, 2000. So I was it was literally just a hard-coded HTML page, but you had little templates. There were little wizards that could create little template pages and stuff for you, but there was nothing like PHP, or it was not dynamic. Anyways, I set up this site, so that was my experience. I was living in Los Angeles, so there were tons of startup companies, so I just started submitting resumes and trying to get a job. Mm-hmm. And the first job I got was with a company that, I think it was in 1999, 2000. It was called Latitude 90, which ended up being changed to L90, and it was a ad serving company. It was basically like DoubleClick. We were a competitor of DoubleClick, and I started out in tech support, which was basically companies would send these HTML banners or JavaScript banners, and we would have to, sometimes tweak them to get them into the ad serving system. So that's how I started to learn a little bit of coding, and that was all written in Perl. So I actually learned Perl. It was MySQL mostly. They were using some Oracle, but I think it was mostly MySQL and Perl. And so that's kind of how I learned. I got into open source development was Perl and JavaScript, a little bit of JavaScript and HTML. But it was an advertising company, so there was definitely an emphasis on marketing. So from my very first job, I was involved with sort of internet marketing. But how I got into internet business, I didn't, I just always was interested in doing things. So the first site I ever set up and I tried to monetize was a site which is still around, sourgrapes.org. And I just posted a bunch of like I somehow found the Amazon affiliate program. And basically, again, I was still doing a lot of screenwriting. So I set up sourgrapes.org. We were doing it similar to The Onion, but we were also doing some videos and just writing some comedy. So I was writing scripts and stuff. So it was kind of like an entertainment site, that portal. And So I got the bright idea to monetize it, and I had somehow found the Amazon. This was early Amazon. Again, this was it was before 2001 because I got laid off from L90 by 2001. They went belly up. They got bought up. So it was before 2001, but somewhere in that 1999 to 2001 period, I ran into the Amazon affiliate program, and I got this bright idea that since it was a comedy site, I could create banner ads for comedy movies like Groundhog Day, some of the best comedy, just all the great comedy movies. So I created a little JavaScript. I got the Amazon affiliate code. I created a little JavaScript to rotate these banners in. Mm-hmm. So every page refresh, you would see a new banner ad, as I said, Groundhog Day, Liar Liar, just all the great comedy movies. And I said, it's a comedy site, so I'm going to sell tons of these things. And it just was crickets, man. And it went on for maybe a year. And finally, one of the other guys who was writing was contributing to the thing. He wanted to buy one of the videos, so he clicked on my ad and bought the video. So I saw one sale after a year. And but I was like, gee, well, I guess it actually, like the technical aspects were actually working, but nobody was buying these videos. So I learned an important lesson there. And then as things were winding down, actually, I guess that was the biggest step. As things were winding down to L90, we could tell things were not going that well. The company just was never quite profitable. So we could kind of tell things were winding down. I started learning more and more programming. And as I said, they were using Perl. So that's what everybody knew at that company. So I learned Perl, and I created a site called therightcast.com. And that's still around. And that's basically a site where actors can just, key in a bunch of data from their resume, and then hit a button, and it creates a nice actor resume page, so they can just basically put themselves online. And again, this was like in 2000, so back then it was kind of a novel idea. There were other places doing it, but it was kind of a neat idea. And I had a lot of actor friends saying, hey, can you build me a website? So I was like, well, maybe I can build this tool that will just create a website. They can do it themselves, but I'll create the tools. So that site is still in business, and I got that up and running. And again, just through trial and error, I was like, well, how can I market this thing? And, I told all my actor friends, and I got them to sign up for free accounts and told them to tell their friends. But, that literally got zero sales. And then at some point I bumped in, this was early days of Google AdWords, very early days of Google AdWords. So I signed up again. This is probably by 2001. So I signed up for a Google AdWords account and started using Google AdWords, and that actually did work. And back then you were only paying like 5 cents a click, mm-hmm. and you could bid on some pretty competitive terms, like actor website or websites for actors. It was the exact terms I wanted, and I did see a positive ROI. And again, we're not talking about big numbers, but I got to the point where I was spending like maybe $300 a month. And I was selling the service for $12 a year, and that's probably a whole nother episode in pricing things. And I probably priced it too low. I just didn't build in any margin to market it. But I figured if I could just break even with the advertising. If I could just break even, I figured a lot of those actors would join for a second and third year, which is true. I still have members that have been with me for like 10 years. So I figured if I could just every month break even, then I would probably ultimately come out ahead, because these actors would pay the $12 for a year, and then the next year many of them would join. And so that would basically be my profit. And I had a job, like I had a full-time job. So it wasn't like I was really in any kind of a thing. So basically that's what I did. And as I said, I got up to the point where, 350, 380, 320, somewhere in that range was how much I was spending, and I was breaking even. I was able to basically sell $12, 350 divided by $12. That's how many new actors I was bringing on. So I was basically breaking even. But it got the whole loop was there. It was like a comprehensive business where, I built the product and I marketed the product, and I didn't really have to do anything. I did some manual, and still to this day do some manual. I'll just look at the actors before I approve them, so that, you don't get crazy people uploading all kinds of weird things. And it's really never been that much of a problem. And I manually approved the casting notices. That was the other thing I realized early on was, I need to build a system where these actors will have casting notices. So I got that into the system as well, where I got production companies to post casting notices. So that was the loop. So then I started emailing casting notices and email casting directors and producers and saying, hey, post your casting notice on this site. And then I also made it easy for these actors that were in my system to respond to it. But I would say that was sort of my beginning stages, was just building that site and actually getting it, I won't say profitable, but getting it to the point where it was like actually a working, functioning business.
So let me ask you, were you, in the back of your mind at this whole time, were you kind of thinking like, screenwriting is my real passion, and these are just kinds of ways to stay afloat and ways to finance my dream? And because I'm sure you're not the only one who entered online business sort of as a means to finance doing the thing that they love, or maybe weave it into the thing that they love. So I'm kind of curious, did online business become an end in and of itself for you, kind of an interesting thing in and of itself, or in the back of your mind are you always thinking like selling screenplays, that's my real calling?
Yeah, and this may surprise people, but no, I don't. Like, one of the things that definitely inspired me was, as I said, working for L90. They were doing advertising for these websites, and I could see how much these websites were making. Like, I knew how much they were making. And one of our sites was ain'titcoolnews.com. Like, we had some sites for a while. I think we were actually doing The Onion. I think that's actually how I heard about The Onion. And maybe we weren't doing all their ads, but we were doing some of their ads. And so I saw how much these sites were making, which was pretty good money back then. And so I did feel like, I think that was part of the inspiration, was just seeing that these businesses were actually working and thinking, gee, what could I do to build something similar to that? But I didn't really look at it as something that, like, once I got programming with Perl and stuff, and to this day, I still enjoy, like, now it's PHP, but I still enjoy programming in PHP. And truthfully, writing screenplays is brutal work, man. It's not like, I really look at screenwriting much like running a marathon, and I have run one marathon in my life, so that's my experience with marathons. But when you're actually running the marathon, it's not that much fun. What's really fun is when the sense of fulfillment and relief and accomplishment that you get when you are done. And that, for me, is a lot of what screenwriting is. I enjoy the movie making process to some degree, but the actual screenwriting is brutal work. And truthfully, like, if I had a choice, if someone said, spend 6 hours, writing PHP code, or spend 6 hours writing a screenplay, I would choose the PHP code. I genuinely look forward to the days where I'm going to do some actual programming. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's actually fun for me. And profitable.
Yeah.
But everyone tells me now that doing the code is not, coding has become such a commodity.
Yeah.
You can get someone in the Philippines, you can get someone in Eastern Europe to do it so much cheaper. Everyone tells me now that it's a bad decision for me to spend that time. I should be spending my time on higher level decision making. But I genuinely enjoy it. So did I look at this as a way of funding my real passion of screenwriting? No, I don't think I did. I think I looked at it as something that I genuinely liked. I like entrepreneurship. I liked starting the right cast. It was fun for me. I mean, I always played games like Age of Empires and what's the other one, Civilization 4. And I remember playing those games and thinking, the amount of brain energy that I'm spending on these games, I could be putting to something useful. And, building the right cast was very similar, at least in my mind. It was fun for me. Trying to figure out the AdWords, get it to the point where it was profitable. And I actually had something to show for it, as opposed to, maybe winning a game of Civilization 4. So the enjoyment factor wasn't that much different. I like playing those video games, Civilization 4. That was great fun, but I also had great fun doing the right cast. And truthfully, screenwriting is a notch below that in the fun, the hierarchy of fun. Actual screenwriting is below coding and
I noticed that about you too, because for the people listening / and or watching, Ashley and I are in a mastermind together. I've been there almost a year. You've been there longer than that, but I joined about a year ago. And two things really struck me about you was, number one is your kind of childlike wonder about just experimenting and playing with different things and just trying new approaches. You're constantly tinkering, which is a good attitude, because I know, and I'm guilty of this, a lot of times you'll just write, to-do lists, and you'll have all these ideas, but you got to implement all that stuff. You've got to fail fast, right? To use a startup cliche. And the second thing I noticed about you, and this kind of leads into the next question I have for you, is you have, and you've inspired me personally with I've asked you about this sense of hustle. You know, when my MemberFix thing was getting started, you told me to go beat the bushes for clients, however the heck I got them, it didn't matter as long as I got them. And then when I kind of came to the group and started complaining that, I can't scale this thing, and you're like, I'm not convinced that you can't scale this. And you told me that several times. Well, try again, try harder. And I did, and I hired somebody, and it kind of failed again. But you're still telling me that you're not convinced about it.
I'm still not convinced. And we had a new guy in our mastermind this week, and you were going through your whole spiel about, hey, I made some mistakes in this business, and I wasn't going to interrupt you and start arguing with you again. But it did occur to me then that, it doesn't sound that like it's not scalable.
Well, okay, but let's not get off topic.
Fair enough.
The point is where did you develop this kind of sense of hustle, and how do you, if somebody who doesn't have it naturally, let's say, how do you cultivate this vital quality for entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and I don't know that I have a good answer to that, and I know that I'm somewhat unique in that. When I first got to Hollywood, I went to UCLA has these extension classes where they're like continuing education, a continuing adult education, and it's very well regarded in the screenwriting community. They have a lot of screenwriting classes. So I went to one of these classes, and there was, maybe just for the sake of simplicity, there was 20 people in the class, and the screenwriter who was teaching the class, he was a TV writer, I think, and he said, well, why are you here? And there was me and one other guy, but 18 out of the 20 people basically said the same thing. I got all these great ideas, but I don't know what to do with them. I don't know how to get them down on paper or turn them into a screenplay. That was 18. And then me and this one other guy said, yeah, I've written a bunch of scripts, but how do I sell them? And and it's like, I think that there is, so to answer your question, I don't know. It seems like a lot of people, that seems to be a humongous problem. I don't really have that problem. Like, I just set out to do something, and it doesn't, I don't know. I just say I'm going to go do something, and then I go do it. I don't get too caught up, and I never really have. My parents are incredibly hard workers. My mom was a school teacher. My dad worked for the federal government. So it's nothing that really would stand out to you, but they're both now retired, but they're still incredibly hard workers, and they don't, my dad has this, he has this little race car that he races, and he spends an enormous amount of time, fixing it and pulling the motor out and doing these things. And they both spend a lot of time on their garden. So they just like doing things, as opposed to like sitting and watching sports or something. And not that there's anything wrong with that. But both my parents are just very hard workers. So I don't know. As I said, I like doing it. And I think that's a big thing. I remember I saw John Chow talk once, and people were kind of asking him, and he's one of these famous online, make money online guys. And, they said, well, how much do you work, and this and that, and he was going into it, and it's like, his answer was, I work all the time. I love doing it. And I think that there's a certain amount of that. It's like, ultimately, if it's not something you really enjoy doing, it's going to be tough to force yourself. Like, I don't have to force myself to get up and go to work. I like doing it. I look forward to it. It's, as I said, it's fun. I look forward. I wake up early, and as I get older, I'm waking up earlier in the morning and getting out of bed sooner and sooner. But it's not like that much of an effort. I don't have to I got to go sit at the computer and work. So I don't know. I don't know that there's any answer to that. I think maybe trying to find something that you are passionate about, so that you can look forward to it. I don't know. I don't know that I have a good answer for it, but
I'll just add.
I do.
Sorry. I'll just add to kind of round out that perspective, because I don't share that quality, and it must be nice to have, I think. But for me, especially getting started in the online business thing, it was very much an uphill battle, and I very much didn't want to do it. But my dad told me something a long time ago. And it's a Russian saying, actually, because we're Ukrainian, but he said, and he was referring to work and being a hard worker and everything. He said, sometimes the appetite comes with the food. You're not hungry, then the food comes on the table, you smell it, you start to enjoy it. In other words, you get into the thick of the process, and then you just get into this kind of flow state where you could be doing anything. You could be gardening, you could be writing a screenplay, you could be working on your online business, but it's inevitable that you have to work your butt off to get anything done. And whether somebody's kind of manic like you in a good way, or they need some sort of external motivation, I guess one way or another you have to work, you have to hustle, and however you motivate yourself to do that, that's your business.
Yeah.
But you got to find a way.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. I mean, there's too many smart people in this world, that are willing to work 12 hours a day. And so it's like, to be good at something, I mean, that's sort of the level of commitment that it takes. You have to be willing to, I mean, if you're going to be good at things, I mean, unless you're just, incredibly talented at something, it's going to take hard work. So,
okay, on that note, let me ask you about your Selling Your Screenplays.com site. Okay, we talked about the right cast. What's the story with Selling Your Screenplay, and can you talk a little bit about the history of it and how you sort of built it up into, how you got the traffic and how you built the audience for that site?
Yeah. As I said, I built the right cast, and I got it to the point where it was making a little bit of money. And I think at some point I cooled off the AdWords spend just because I'd kind of lost interest in it. And it continued to make, let's say, $300 a month without spending anything on advertising. This was after maybe 2 or 3 years. So I had like enough of sort of just a momentum that I could turn off the advertising and it continued to make money. So what I decided at that point was, it seems like this basically has worked to some degree. So what if I scaled that and I created 10 or 20 sites that made $300 a month? So I started looking around for ways to create sites that could make, $200, $300, $400 a month. And I started doing that. I had a friend who had a baseball card site, like literally he just had a big baseball card collection and wanted to sell baseball cards online. So I built he was a college buddy of mine. So just, out of the goodness of my heart, I built him a site. And very, very quickly after we built that site, he had people coming to him wanting to advertise on the site. And so that got me thinking, gee, well, if I could build like sports-oriented sites, and basically they wanted to buy text links. And again, the world has changed. This was probably 2003 or 4 or something. So the world has changed since then. But it was mostly ticket brokers wanting to put text links on his site for the SEO value. But he had this one site with virtually no traffic, and like within, let's say, 3 or 4 months, he was making like $500 a month off this thing with these text links. He had like 10 advertisers or something he was making. So he was charging him $50 and said, as I said, so maybe $300, $400, $500, and just completely found money for him. So I thought, gee, if I could build out a bunch of sports sites, I could do something different. So that was sort of my next project. Was I built a bunch of these sports sites, and I just started building other projects. Many of them completely flopped and didn't go anywhere. Some of them made a little bit of money. Some of them I never even finished. So over the course of a few years, I built a bunch of these sites. And at some point, like in 2009, I had a bunch of these sites making a few $100s. But at some point in 2009, I went to, I think it was an affiliate marketing conference in Vegas. I just drove out there, and the speaker was Gary Vaynerchuk, that's his name, and he was like the marquee speaker. And I had just started a blog. My mom had just retired, and I had just created a gardening blog for her. She had retired. She wanted something to do, and it's now like got a gazillion posts because she is a worker bee, and she's just put up literally gazillions and gazillions of posts every day for whatever it is, 6, 7 years. But anyway, so I just set that site up. So this was like February, maybe March of 2009. Gary Vaynerchuk was talking, and he had this thing where he was like, so many of you affiliate marketers, and essentially that's what I was doing. Most of these sites that I was setting up were just kind of, as I said, little bitty sites that had some sort of an affiliate component to them. And he said, most of you guys out here, you're hitting singles and doubles, but you're not going for the home run. And, I just got to thinking about that. And I heard another quote. I guess Barry White did a bunch of music producing, and right around the same time I heard this thing, Gary Vaynerchuk say this thing, I heard this quote from Barry White where, he had produced a bunch of music, and some other musician or producer or something said to him, these albums are great, but they're missing the biggest talent that you have, which is you. You're not involved in these things. And not that I'm the biggest talent, but I thought, there's something to that. I should get involved in these businesses. And I had already bought sellingyourscreenplay.com. And this was one of these failed ventures. I had bought sellingyourscreenplay.com, and I had written an ebook and published an ebook. So my idea was, hey, maybe I can make $200 or $300 a month off of this ebook. And I was still screenwriting. I'd sold a bunch of scripts, optioned a bunch of scripts. So I thought that I had enough credibility. And again, I was going to use AdWords to push traffic to it. So Selling Your Screenplay was up by that time, but it was just basically a sales landing page to sell my ebook. And, I sold an occasional copy, like maybe once every 2 or 3 months. I would sell a copy of this ebook, but not even close to the $300 a month mark, which was sort of what I was hoping for. So I saw Gary Vaynerchuk talk. I heard this quote from Barry White. I was like, that's what I should do. I should start a blog. And really, I'll start the blog, because that was the other thing. I published the ebook through BookLocker. And they were telling me, hey, one of the ways you can sell more ebooks is starting a blog. So that's really what Selling Your Screenplay started as. As I said, initially sellingyourscreenplay.com was just a landing page for this ebook I'd written. And then the next phase of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to start publishing. And I just set a fairly unambitious, at this point I had a programming job in 2009. So I was making some money off screenwriting, but my main livelihood, I had a full-time job as a programmer, doing PHP coding essentially. So in my spare time, I said I'm going to write one blog post per week for a year, just 50 blog posts for the year to get it up. And so that's kind of what I did. So and the idea was, hey, I can sell this ebook. And so I started blogging, started getting the thing up, and I started getting, I did all the typical things. I commented on other people's blogs. I went to Reddit and commented in the Reddit screenplay or screenwriting subforum, and all those typical type things. Stumble Upon was big back in 2009. So I was doing all these sort of typical online marketing things, and I wasn't selling any ebooks, But I wasn't selling any books, but I was getting some good feedback. Like people were emailing me and saying, hey, I really like what you're doing. And I basically, all I was doing was I was explaining up to that point how I had sold, maybe 2 or 3 scripts and optioned, maybe 15 scripts. So I was basically just explaining kind of how I had gone about doing it. And a big component of what I've done in terms of selling scripts is doing cold query letters. And that's a whole nother topic, but essentially you get email addresses of production companies and you send them a cold query letter saying, hey, I'm a screenwriter and here's my log line for my new screenplay. Would you like to read it and potentially produce it? And I would just send out these query letters, and I got better and better because I know how to program. I got better at scraping sites and building these lists, and also pushing these things out, learning how to actually deliver hundreds and then ultimately thousands of emails. So I started to have more and more success with my actual screenwriting career because I became more and more aggressive with cold query letters. And I was essentially talking about that on the blog, how I was optioning stuff, how I was selling stuff. And it was resonating with people. Now, there's sort of a general feeling in the screenwriting industry that cold query letters don't work. I'm kind of the lone wolf in this. But I think, again, and maybe that's a topic for another day, but it was working for me, and I was explaining to it. I was getting some good feedback. So ultimately I said, maybe I should sell this as a product. I should sell access to this. I've now created this database of, thousands of agents and managers and producers. So maybe I should sell that as a service. So I had the blog up. I think I had it up for about 2 years when I basically created, a paid forum. And my idea was, I'll charge them $5 a month to get them into the forum, And I was hoping to build a forum so that screenwriters would interact. And then I would, in order for them to use my email and fax blast, I would get them into the forum, and I would personally review their query letter and logline. And I thought that was enough of incentive to get them in there. And then they would get this $5 monthly charge. And I was hoping that I could build this forum into something that actually had value for these screenwriters. Get them in with the idea of, hey, I'll give them good notes. And they were free to cancel after a month. They could join for 1 month, use the email and fax blast, and then cancel. That wasn't, it wasn't like I was dishonest about that. That basically was what the deal was. But many of them did stay, but most of them did just cancel after a month or 2 months or 3 months, because I wasn't really offering any value. I never got the forum to like a point where it actually had value for screenwriters. But this email and fax blast that I still to this day sell, that was having some value. People did start to option some scripts, and I didn't sell a lot of these, but it made the site kind of profitable. All of a sudden, the site was profitable. And I wasn't spending anything on advertising, so even if I spent, even if I only sold 10 of these a month, 5 or 10 of these a month, it was $1,000 or $1,200 a month that I was making off this thing. And essentially, all at that point I was doing was writing one blog post per week for the marketing. So that's basically kind of how I got that going. And then since then, I've just slowly built it up. And almost 2 years ago to the day, I started, in fact, it might be 2 years to the day, I started a podcast. At this point, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I still listen to a lot of podcasts. I love podcasting. I love listening to podcasts, and I love doing my podcast. So 2 years ago, I started a podcast, and every now and then I'll write a blog post, but I don't really do too much blog posts anymore. But then, just again, the typical things that I've done to build up the podcast, and the podcast has slowly got some momentum, and I've rolled out some additional services. I've rolled out a bunch of, products and services which just completely flopped.
Let me ask you about that. Let me ask you, how did you sort of figure out which services, which products to roll out? Did you do any kind of surveying of your list? Did you kind of interact with your audience to sort of determine, or were you just going by trial and error?
Yeah, ultimately it seems like trial and error. And again, I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I'm, and I hear all these people talk about, customer development and surveying and talking to your customers. And I've definitely tried that, but it just always, I don't know, for some reason it doesn't seem, I'm not that successful at it. And I don't quite know why. Maybe I'm not asking the right questions. I don't know what the deal is, but I've never really gotten this sort of customer development stuff to work. So ultimately what's worked is trial and error for me, is I roll out a product, as quickly and easily as I can, and I see if people actually pay for it. And if they pay for it, I try and scale it up. And if people are not paying for it, and the classes were a big thing, was I started teaching, online classes, webinars through my site and charging for those. And there's a lot of people doing it in this industry. And, I would get a handful of people signing up. And when I say a handful, we're talking like some classes were like 1, 2, 3 people. I wasn't getting a ton of people signing up. So ultimately I just let that die. But I had high hopes for it because, number one, I thought I thought I genuinely delivered a lot of value in these webinars. They're not public, so I'm free to say absolutely anything I want. I can talk about other services. I can talk about what I've done, things that I probably wouldn't say on a podcast. I can say, so I thought I had a lot of insight. I've sold a lot of scripts at this point, optioned a lot of scripts. So I thought I offered a lot of value in these classes. But for whatever reason, I could not get a lot of people to sign up for them. And I just kept, trying them. And I probably kept trying them way too long. And I tried different types of classes, and I got other people to come in and teach some classes, but it just ultimately didn't work. But yeah, so to answer your question, it's just been trial and error. And I'm not against customer development, but for some reason, it just never has worked.
Okay. So, and, it's interesting. Last night I was reading this book, maybe you've read it, it's called The Automatic Customer. And it's sort of the book about membership sites, or more specifically about subscription type businesses and why they're so superior to a business that just does one-off sales, both in terms of peace of mind for the vendor and also in terms of being able to resell the business. It's much more valuable that way. And one of the things that he writes in the book is that traditionally, or what they found, is that business to business membership sites and business to business services are kind of the biggest winners, I guess because businesses feel like when they buy a service for their business, they're investing, whereas if a consumer is buying a service, they feel like, it's like a discretionary spend. So my question is how do you sort of market to this group of people who probably don't necessarily have much money to begin with, and how do you sort of convince them that they need your services? What's the marketing angle? How do you win trust in this kind of niche?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things, and I've thought about that some as well. I mean, number one, I think that throughout the world, there is just an enormous number of people who want to write screenplays and who've written screenplays, and they don't really know anything about selling them or marketing them. So I think the potential market is enormous. So that's number one. Number two, I'm not fully convinced that this is B2C. I mean, essentially, a screenwriter is a business. And I think that's kind of the thing. I mean, I as a screenwriter myself, I am literally incorporated. And when I sell a script or option a script, I mean, it's between, the producer and my company. So I think ultimately a lot of these screenwriters are amateurs, so they're not incorporated and they're not fully set up on sort of the business side of things. But ultimately, I do think that this is, in some ways, it is B2B. I mean, a lot of the people, the idea is they're going to pay for services, and that is going to bring them money. Now, some people are very unrealistic about that fact, but the bottom line is I think that there is this idea that I'm investing. I'm not just spending. It's not entertainment. I think, and that's where I think video game downloads or something, that becomes sort of more of the pure B2C play, and trying to convince them to spend money on a DVD or entertainment or a video game or something like that. That becomes it becomes a totally different marketing strategy. Whereas this, I think that there is an element. You are probably right. Most of these people are consumers. Most of these people are not going to sell scripts, and so they are more of just hobbyists. But some of them will, and everybody thinks that they're going to. So I think that's part of it. But what is my marketing message and how do I do it? I mean, what I'm doing now is almost entirely. Well, I won't say entirely. I've started to do some other things now, but. It's the podcast, and I have screenwriters on the podcast, and I talk about that. I mean, I try and be as transparent as possible. I try and be honest as possible, and so hopefully I build trust. A lot of people email me, hey, can I use your email and fax blast? This is what I'm trying to do. And it's like, I tell them no. I mean, a lot of people are not good fits for the email and fax blast, and I don't have a problem with telling people no. So, I just try and be I do the podcast. I try and be as honest, as transparent as possible. With that said, I also am now doing some marketing with Facebook ads, and I'm also doing some email marketing using other people's email blasts, where I contact other similar screenwriting services. I contact them and say, hey, could I put an ad in your email? And sometimes I'll pay them cash, but sometimes we'll do a trade where I let them email my list, and they email my list and I email their list, and do it like that. But so that's basically right now the three forms of marketing that I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm going to cherry pick the podcast bit too, because you hear, it's kind of a cliche now in online business, is start a podcast, whatever you're doing, drop that and start a podcast instead. And I think out of that inertia, a lot of people sort of resist starting a podcast, but then a lot of people sort of just do it. I started it just because I thought it was kind of the thing to do, and it's amazing how having a podcast, even though all it is just you and a microphone and your Skype connection, somehow that it has a magical way of attracting some pretty high profile people. Like I saw the guests that you had on your podcast, you have some pretty well-known people on there, like really well-known guys. And of course people want to tune in and see that. And then that authority from those people gets sort of transferred by osmosis over to you and adds to your credibility. So I'm just going to reiterate that whatever you guys are doing out there in internet land, if you don't have a podcast for your product or service, it doesn't even have to be about your product or service per se, but just to sort of add value, get high profile people, connect with them. I mean, it's a big deal, man. Like, podcasts are really great.
Yeah. I'm very bullish on it. I mean, I like, podcasts now, they've been around for many, many years, but I still think there's going to be tremendous growth. I mean, I just remember when I had a job and I was listening to podcasts, it's like I couldn't, I had whatever it was, a 30, 40, 50-minute commute back and forth. So we're talking about, an hour and a half of 2 hours a day where I would listen to these podcasts. And, I couldn't find enough. I couldn't find enough good podcasts. 5 days a week I was doing this commute. I couldn't find good podcasts that I look forward to listening to. So it's like, if you can produce something that's interesting and good, there's people out there just hungry to have something other than, the Mike and Mike morning show to listen to. So I totally agree. I think it's an excellent way, and I still think there's a lot of room in probably every niche to grow. I also think, and I know this from listening to, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, there's a certain sort of like celebrity in your mind that the host takes on, and they are like there's a certain amount of just celebrity and looking up to that person, and there is trust and like hearing the voice and seeing the actual person on YouTube. It's not just some shady guy in Russia trying to scam you out of your money. It's like you actually see the person, you hear the person talk. There's a lot you can get from just body language and that kind of stuff that builds trust. And ultimately membership sites and a lot of these products and services, ultimately a lot of them revolve around trust. Well, who is this guy? Can I really trust this guy with my money? Is this guy really telling the truth?
Yeah.
And writing a blog post does not come close to sort of the interaction of a podcast, of actually hearing your voice. So I'm totally with you. I'm totally bullish. And exactly what you say too is just interacting with these people. I have a meeting later today. One of the guys I interviewed, a director I interviewed on the podcast, I have a meeting later today. I'm going to talk to him. He needs a screenwriter to write a new project he's working on. And so I'm talking to him, and the introduction was through the podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
So I mean, these things can really just has a big ripple effect.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about the relationships that you cultivate. But I've been meaning to ask you too, is we've sort of been talking about these services that you sort of arbitrage the lead generation for your screenwriter audience and help them find jobs and that kind of thing. Since this is the Membership Site Success podcast after all, what role does recurring revenue play in your business, and to what degree is it automated for Selling Your Screenplay and for the Writecast?
Yeah, I mean, what I realized, like as I said, until I would say a few months ago, the reoccurring revenue was not really that great, and now I feel like I've got it on track. I rolled out a script analysis service in February, and I really did it. I was very busy on some other projects, and I just kind of did it as a whim. I had some other script analysts, but they were kind of high end, so it was like a fairly expensive analysis of a script, and I didn't really sell very many of them. But I was like, well, I'm gonna have something a lower priced. I'll get some less experienced people so that they charge less to read the script, but I'll charge less on this analysis. And I rolled that out just really. I didn't even necessarily think it was going to work, but I just was like trying anything. And I was frankly a little discouraged with Selling Your Screenplay. It kind of had plateaued revenue-wise, and I wasn't sure if my marketing was really working, because as I said, I've been doing the podcast at that point a year and a half, and so I rolled this thing out, and right like the day I rolled it out, I had my first sale, and I could tell all of a sudden I continued to get sales, that first week, and so all of a sudden I realized that my marketing was working. That wasn't the problem. The problem was
the right product.
The right product.
Yeah.
And so what I realized was, as I said, I would have people join my membership site for a month or two, and I still do this. I still review their log line and their query letter in the forum so that they can use this email and fax blast. So they would join for a couple months, and I had recorded all these classes I had done, so you could have access to these webinar classes that I had done. You had access to those, but I wasn't really providing value to the screenwriters that were coming to the forum. But I realized that I felt like my marketing was actually working. So what I ended up realizing was I need to provide value to these people that join the site so that they stick around.
Yeah.
And number one, they stick around, and number two, I get more people to join. So I started aggressively pursuing leads, paid screenwriting leads. I felt like maybe that would be something that screenwriters would be interested in having. And there's other companies out there that provide a similar service. So it wasn't like it was my brilliant idea. There's numerous companies out there. There's probably a half dozen other companies, all the way down to Craigslist. I mean, Craigslist will have some screenwriting leads on it as well. So there's tons of places that have this type of stuff. I have this big, database of producers and stuff. So that was the first thing I did. Was I said, well, I'm going to create a monthly newsletter where the screenwriters can put their log lines in, and then I will email that newsletter to a list of producers. So I started just emailing my list of producers saying, hey, would you guys be interested in accepting and taking a look at a monthly newsletter from some up and coming screenwriters? And, I think at this point I'm close to 200. I think I got 160, 170 producers that have signed up to receive our newsletter. And then I started just asking them, hey, do you need any types of scripts? What kind of screenplays are you looking for? I have this big site of screenwriters. We're hungry to get our stuff. And so producers start to email me and say, hey, I need a script like this, or I need a script like that. So that's then what I'm now, basically, that's, I would say, the main part of SYS Select, my monthly membership. And now growth has been growing. I mean, since June, I've probably come close to doubling my membership just since June. So it seems like that product is something people actually want. Because as I said, I feel like my marketing is actually in place. But now I just need to provide. The thing is, everybody in every business, ultimately, you have to provide value to your members. And so it's like, if these screenwriters feel like they're getting value, they're interfacing with producers, that has value to them, and they'll stick around and they'll tell their friends, and the thing will just grow on its own. So I think that's my focus now, is just trying to really think about how I can offer more value, because the membership, having that reoccurring monthly revenue is a great. You don't have to worry about constantly. Yeah. You know how much money you're going to have, and it's growing. I'm getting a lot more people join every month than people that quit. So I don't know at some point, I guess it will plateau. But so now I'm really trying to focus on what other value can I bring to these screenwriters? What else can I do to help them and help them sell scripts? And
that's kind of interesting conceptually, because what you're doing sort of is acting as a liaison between the higher ups, or who the screenwriters, the aspiring screenwriters, perceive these people to be kind of the people they need to get connected with. And also Hollywood is this, and that industry, the film industry, the music industry, certain industries are very, nepotism driven. Is that you have to know the right people. And if you don't, like, you could be, the next Al Pacino, but if you're not meeting the right people and not getting the right connections, it's all for naught, right? So, and the funny thing is, too, you'd never find this out just surveying your list. You know what I mean? Because nobody would just write, hey, hook me up with, hotshot producers. And you just sort of rolled out the product. You failed fast, or in this case, you didn't fail, but you failed fast before that. And then you found something that hit. And that's really cool. And I guess there's really no substitute for just working hard and trying a lot of different things in your business. But let me ask you this. Since you've been running this site for quite a while, and the sister site, The Right Cast, have you had some spectacular failures? Have you learned some big lessons that sort of carry over into business as a whole that you could share, or even just in this particular business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say, I mentioned the classes, and I'm still like thinking, because I like the class.
What do the classes teach exactly?
Well, it was from soup to nuts. I mean, I basically started out with coming up with a marketable concept. I mean, I feel like that's one thing I've done very well in my screenwriting career is, I've gotten pretty good at writing scripts that actually have a chance in the marketplace. And I'd say that's the number one problem that new screenwriters have, is they write a script about some personal journey or anything really. They write a script and
something
it has
self-indulgent.
Yeah, and self-indulgent, and that's a kind of maybe a little bit harsh way of describing it, but they write something that has virtually no chance of ever finding a market.
Yeah.
And so that was like one of my first classes as an example. Hey, how to come up with a marketable concept. And I kind of went through my process and how you look at your concepts and gauge whether they're marketable or not. I thought it was a valuable class. I still like the thing because, as I said, I enjoy teaching the classes. I enjoy preparing for the classes. I spend a lot of time preparing the outline, but just did not sell them. So that's one valuable lesson.
And I just want to point out too that you said when we just started the podcast that when you went to that class, that you and the other guy raised your hand talking about the one aspect, but then the rest of the class said, "Hey, how do I sit down and actually get this thing going?" And that's sort of what you were teaching. So the market research would have you believe that that was the one to sell, but it didn't really actually sell that well.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
That's a good point. I'm almost thinking though, as I said, these other 18 people, they needed something more fundamental because they weren't necessarily interested. They weren't even to the step of, hey, how do I write a marketable concept?
I see.
Because the people that want that realize you have to write a marketable concept, they've written a script or two and they haven't been able to sell them. And so now they're taking a step back and saying, well, gee, why didn't these other scripts? Those 18 people, and I think your point is well taken, those 18 people weren't even to the point where they understood that they needed a marketable concept. They just had this idea that they thought was brilliant and they needed to figure out how to turn that brilliant idea into a screenplay. So maybe that's why my classes failed. Maybe I need to go back and look at that and offer some sort of a class to those 18 people. I'm just not sure what that would actually look like. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of some of the other failures. I mean, I've talked about a lot of things. I mean, I've launched a lot of sites and a lot of things, that just did not work. And I don't know. It just didn't really bother me. I mean, as I said, just kept trying new things. But
you're one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was sort of just for selfish purposes, Ashley, to tell you the truth, because what really resonates with me about the fact that you were able to make this site successful financially is that I know I'm not alone in that I got into online business as a means to an end. Some people are in it just because they genuinely enjoy business and it's fun just in and of itself, and it is, but somewhere in the back of their head, you're thinking, man, when I cash out finally, not that that's ever going to really happen for most people, but when I'm finally all set, then I'll do that thing that I was thinking about. In my case, it's songwriting. In somebody else's case, it might be acting. In somebody else's case, it might be, a sport or chess or whatever it is. But I always think, well, what if you could sort of add value to that community, participate in your passion, and yet find a way to make money? Because I want to say too, when I worked as a musician, and I'm sure you've seen this in Hollywood a lot too, is there's so many people that they're working so hard. I mean, musicians and actors and artists, they're some of the hardest working people you'll ever meet in your life, and they're making nothing. They're spending all day practicing, rehearsing, running to auditions, running to gigs. They make jack shit, financially speaking. And it's like, what is it all for? It's just so that you could burn out in 10 years. Maybe you'll catch a big break. It's like, no. Instead of depending on this establishment, on the music industry, on the acting industry, film industry, take control, learn some business skills, learn some marketing skills, and try to turn your passion into profit in a way that you're not selling your soul. And I thought that was really beautiful that you did that, and I thought it'd be an inspiration to others who are kind of in the same boat. It's an inspiration to me for sure.
Yeah. And you had mentioned your songwriting, and I totally think you should start that up sooner rather than later. Start a community for songwriters, and you do have a lot of marketing knowledge that I know would be valuable to singer-songwriters. So I would encourage you to start that sooner rather than later. I read a book called Mastery, and it was
Good
the guy
book.
from Mixergy. What's that?
Good book.
Yeah. But one of the things that he really emphasized in that book was this sort of idea of, taking two different things that you're an expert in and mixing them together for kind of a hybrid thing that only you can do. And I kind of think that's what I've done. As I mentioned, I started in the late 90s. I was doing a lot of screenwriting, but I was also working in internet marketing. And ultimately, my marketing of screenplays sort of became, and that's kind of a mashup. And as I said, I totally think you're in a similar position. You've worked as a musician, so you understand sort of the problems of that world, and you've also worked worked in internet marketing. So I think it would be a perfect fit. And I think there's very few people, like there's a lot of musicians out there, there's a lot of internet marketers out there, but there's not that many people that have that combination of the two things, and can combine those two things. And that's what I hope I've done with Selling Your Screenplay, is I've tried to take a lot of my marketing knowledge and applied that to screenwriting. And I've applied it to marketing the site Selling Your Screenplay, but I've also applied it to my own screenwriting career. And then I also try and then tell people, hey, this is what I'm doing to market my scripts. And that hopefully provides value.
For sure. So, okay, let's distill that and say, well, what would be your kind of number one tip that you could offer to people who are just getting started online, whatever your background may be, but if you're getting started online or you're trying to build a membership site, maybe you've been online for a while, but you're trying to get that recurring aspect, which is so much more valuable, what's the number one kind of tip that you could offer? Your number one piece of advice?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know if I'd say the number one piece of advice, but I don't know. I remember I saw, the guy Darren Rouse, the guy that does ProBlogger.net. I saw him at one of these conferences, and he was talking about, he has like digital photography studio.net or something. He has a digital photography site which he built up to quite a good business. And I remember one of the pieces of advice he said was, you got to look at these things as long-term plays. And I definitely think that's one big problem people have. And that's what I did with Selling Your Screenplay. I had heard this from Darren Rouse, and so I had this in my head. You're going to spend probably 2 years just trying to build an audience, whether that be for a podcast, a blog, provide value for a couple of years. And that's really what I did with Selling Your Screenplay. Was I didn't really try, I had some Google AdSense ads or something like that, but I didn't really try and monetize the site at all. I just tried to build trust, build an audience, and see what kind of a reaction you're going to get. So I think if you're just really at the beginning stages, I would say start there. Start to provide value first, because it's going to be very, very difficult. I don't even know if it's possible. It's going to be very difficult to create. I think it's going to be very difficult to create a reoccurring membership site if the value is not clear and the trust is not there. That's really what you're ultimately selling. So I would say dig in for the long haul and start a podcast, start a blog, get into the space. And that's a lot of times not what people want to hear.
Yeah.
That it's going to take, hey, I want to get this thing going in a month or two. And I don't know. I as I said, with Selling Your Screenplay, it's been around since 2009, and this is really the first year, 2015. So we're talking 6 years where I'm really making any significant money off of it. So,
yeah. So just hard work and hustle. There's just no substitute.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Trying a lot of things, and that's I really believe that. You mentioned that sort of early in the podcast, that I try a lot of things.
Yeah, you do.
And I really, really believe more than anything, just trying things. And it's like I've really ingrained that as sort of a part of my philosophy, is just try things. You just don't know. Again, one of these internet conferences I went to, I saw one of these, super affiliate guys talking, and he said, he made the point. He said, even he was like an experienced one of these top super affiliates, and he was like, it's, you just don't know what's going to work. And he had been doing this for years, and he's like, you got to just get out there and try stuff. And I really believe that the top marketing people in the world, they probably have a little bit better understanding of what's going to work and not work compared to just the rank amateur. But the main thing that I think the top marketing people understand is they understand sort of the process of testing things quickly and interpreting those results and doing a lot of things. It's not like most people are going to think, oh, well, they've been doing it so long, so they can pick the winners easier. And that's probably a part of it, but that's probably like 5% of it. 95% of it is just they understand that there's going to be a lot of failures, and they understand that you got to get through this process of failure as quickly as possible so you can just keep trying things. I've been following Frank Kern, on Facebook. I liked his page or something, so I get his ads. Mm-hmm. And he's got a lot of different products and a lot of different types of ads. He's got free webinars. He's got, paid services. So it's like, that's another tip I would give people, is just look at some of these guys that are at the top of the game and see what they're doing. As I said, I've been experimenting with Facebook ads, and I've been looking at these guys like Frank Kern, and I'm getting his ads on my feed now. And, those guys, they know what they're doing. So look at what they're doing. Look at the pictures they're using. I've been trying to figure out what the best pictures are. I've been trying to test, what does it make any difference? I'm not finding it's actually making much of a difference. I'm rotating in different pictures into my ads, and I'm honestly not finding that the picture is having a big difference on my conversion rates. But I'm looking at Frank Kern's, and he's just got a picture of himself, sitting there talking in front of a whiteboard. I'm thinking, well, maybe I got to get a picture of myself sitting in front of a whiteboard. So I'm going to try that one out here.
Why not? You're the face of your business. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. So,
it's like, he's the Selling Your Screenplay guy. I instantly recognize him.
Yeah. So no, I got
and his baby blue eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And his salt and pepper hair.
I got a whiteboard in the other room. I'm gonna give it a try. So.
That's cool. Okay. Well, I'm pretty much out of questions, Ashley. Is there anything? Let me ask you one last thing. I did have a question. I was wondering, is there anything that you wish that you had sort of done differently, and I know that's an exercise in futility, what if kind of thing, but is there anything that you wish you'd done differently or done earlier that would have allowed you to be successful earlier on?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, hindsight's 20/20, and so I definitely look at the things that are successful, and I think, gee, why didn't I try that earlier? And
so
sometimes
fail faster.
Yeah, exactly. But like the thing with the leads, as I said, I've been thinking about that for years. I mean, and it seems like it's working. People are joining. People are sticking with the site. As I said, I've almost doubled my membership numbers here in the last 2 months. But I don't know why I didn't try it. I honestly don't know. So yeah, it's like, try some of these things. Let's put it to you like this. It's not like I'm sitting around watching a lot of TV and wasting time. So I'm always working on things. And I guess ultimately I just try and prioritize the things I'm doing with what I think is going to be best. And so I guess for whatever reason, I mistakenly put other things ahead of the things that succeeded. But I don't know. I just, like, as far as like a process goes, I don't really know how you can correct that, because that's sort of the whole thing, is it just seems like some things work and some things don't. I don't know. How it is. Yeah. It's I don't know.
Okay. Well, so where can people find you online?
Yeah. I mean, sellingyourscreenplay.com. That's definitely that's my site that we've been talking about. So check that out. I'm on Twitter. It's at Ashley Myers. So you can definitely follow me on Twitter. I mean, the only thing I really use Twitter for is promoting Selling Your Screenplay. So it's not like I'm giving out business tips or anything. I mean, I'm just giving out, I promote my podcast, my screenwriting podcast. I definitely, if you want to hear my podcast, it's sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and you can see the different episodes. I think I'm on about like 86, 87. So here in the next couple of months, I'll be hitting my 100th episode. So I'm trying to figure out, what I can do to celebrate that. But I'm trying to think where else. I have a Facebook page. I think it's facebook.com/selling your screenplay, but I'm not even entirely sure what the URL is on that. But Twitter's good, and definitely the blog.
Okay. Gotcha. Sellingyourscreenplay.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, Ashley. This was a really kind of offbeat and interesting interview, and I'm really glad that you came on.
Yeah. No, I hope people get some value out of it. I don't know. It's kind of went off in all kinds of different directions, but yeah, thanks for having me on. This was fun talking with you.
Wasn't that scrumptious? Thanks for listening to the Membership Site Success Podcast with membership site expert Vic Dorfman. For oodles of free tips, tricks, and tutorials on crushing it with recurring revenue, go to www.vicdorfman.com. It's what all the cool kids do, and you do want to be cool, don't you? See you next time.